This is a very beautiful and touching story. Listen to it, because it will bring value to our lives. On a freezing winter day, a young woman ventures deep into the snow-covered forest, unaware that her life is about to change forever. She stumbles upon a wounded tiger, trapped and in pain. Instead of fleeing, she chooses to help, freeing the beast and nursing its wounds. But fate has a way of repaying kindness. When danger strikes and she is surrounded by wolves, an unexpected savior emerges from the shadows. What happens next is truly unbelievable. Stay until the end. You won't want to miss this story of courage, loyalty, and fate. Hi everyone. Welcome to Narrated Tales, where every story touches the heart. Today I am very happy to share a new story with you. Let's get started. The wind howled through the dense forest, its icy breath sending shivers down Lena's spine as she trudged through the thick blanket of snow. The bare branches of the trees trembled under the weight of frost, cracking slightly with each gust. Snowflakes danced in the air, clinging to her thick woolen cloak, but she hardly noticed. She had a job to do. Her fingers, red and raw from the cold, clutched the handle of her small axe. The villagers had warned her not to venture too deep into the forest, especially during the winter months when the cold was merciless and the creatures desperate. But firewood was running low, and Lena knew she had no choice. She stopped beneath a large oak tree, its bark gnarled with age, and set down the small bundle of wood she had already gathered. As she prepared to swing the axe at a fallen branch, a low, guttural sound made her freeze. It wasn't the wind, it was something else. A deep, throaty growl rumbled through the trees, sending a chill that had nothing to do with the winter cold running down her spine. Her breath hitched, her pulse pounding in her ears. Slowly gripping the axe tighter, she turned toward the sound. At first she saw nothing, just the endless sea of white, the towering trees, their skeletal branches stretching toward the gray sky. Then, a flash of golden fur. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Lying several feet away, half buried in the snow, was a massive tiger. Its once majestic fur was matted with blood, streaks of red staining the pristine snow around it. One of its powerful hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, caught in a rusted metal trap, its sharp teeth biting deep into flesh. Lena inhaled sharply, her heart hammering. She had heard stories of the great beasts that roamed these woods, kings of the wild, untouchable, unstoppable. And yet here it was, one of them brought low, defeated not by a stronger predator, but by a human-made trap. The tiger snarled weakly, baring its massive fangs. But there was no fight left in it. Its golden eyes, dulled with pain, flickered to her. Lena swallowed hard. A voice inside her screamed at her to run, but she didn't move. She saw the agony in the beast's eyes, the way its body trembled from the pain, the exhaustion. It was suffering, and she couldn't just leave it here to die. Her grip on the axe loosened, her decision made. Slowly, carefully, she stepped closer. The tiger let out a weak warning growl, though it barely had the strength to lift its head. "I won't hurt you," Lena whispered, her breath visible in the freezing air. I just want to help." The tiger watched her, its labored breathing heavy in the silence of the snow-covered woods. Lena crouched just outside its reach, inspecting the trap. The metal teeth were buried deep into the tiger's flesh, blood seeping into the snow, forming dark crimson patches. It was old, rusted, likely left behind by poachers or careless hunters. Lena's jaw tightened. "Whoever did this to you is cruel," she murmured, "but I won't let them win." She removed her cloak, setting it aside before rolling up the sleeves of her woolen dress. The tiger's ear twitched slightly, watching her movements with cautious eyes. Lena reached into the small satchel at her waist, fingers fumbling against the glass bottles of herbs she had collected for her mother. She had nothing meant for a wound this deep, but she could at least stop the bleeding. "All right," she whispered, more to herself than to the tiger. "Let's get this off you." She pressed one trembling hand against the cold metal of the trap. The tiger flinched. Lena froze, heart pounding, waiting to see if it would attack. But it didn't. The tiger stared at her, its golden eyes unreadable. Slowly it let out a long exhale and lowered its head into the snow. It was trusting her. Lena took a deep breath and tightened her grip on the trap. 1, 2, 3. She pulled. A metallic snap echoed through the trees as the trap sprang open, releasing the tiger's shredded leg. The beast let out a low, agonized roar, its body tensing. Lena scrambled backward, expecting it to lash out. But instead, the tiger merely lay still, its massive chest heaving, its blood-streaked fur rising and falling with every pained breath. Lena moved quickly, pulling out a strip of cloth from her satchel, soaking it in an herbal solution, and pressing it against the wound. The tiger flinched but did not fight her. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're going to be okay." She worked swiftly, wrapping the makeshift bandage around the tiger's wounded leg. When she was done, she sat back on her heels, exhaling shakily. The tiger watched her, silent and unmoving. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the snow falling softly between them. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, the tiger lowered its massive head and closed its eyes. Lena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was exhausted. It needed rest. She knew she couldn't stay. It was too dangerous. But she also couldn't leave it like this. After a long moment, she stood, pulling her cloak back over her shoulders. "Stay alive." "All right," she murmured. "You're strong. You'll make it." The tiger didn't respond, but its slow, steady breaths told her it was still holding on. Lena took one last look before turning away, disappearing into the trees. She didn't expect to ever see it again. What she didn't know was that the tiger would never forget her, and one day, it would return the favor. Days passed and winter grew even harsher. The wind carried a biting chill, the trees stood bare and brittle, and the snow-covered ground made every step slippery and treacherous. Food was scarce in the village, and firewood was running low again. Lena knew she had no choice but to venture into the forest once more. This time, however, she felt different. Ever since she had rescued the tiger, something had shifted inside her. She no longer saw the forest as just a place to gather wood. It was alive, breathing, filled with creatures that struggled to survive the same way she did. And yet the forest was dangerous. That morning, as Lena tightened her boots and wrapped her woolen cloak tightly around her shoulders, her mother hesitated at the door. "You shouldn't go alone," she warned. "The animals, they're growing desperate in this cold." Lena forced a smile, adjusting the small axe on her belt. "I'll be careful," she assured her. With that, she stepped out into the crisp morning air, her boots sinking into the deep snow as she headed for the trees. The forest was eerily quiet. Lena moved carefully, her breath forming small clouds in the frozen air, her eyes scanning the trees. She made her way to a familiar clearing where fallen branches littered the snow, perfect for firewood. As she knelt to gather the driest pieces, she heard it, a low guttural growl. Her body froze. Slowly, she turned her head toward the sound. Emerging from the shadows of the trees, a pack of wolves slunk toward her, their fur bristling, their yellow eyes glowing with hunger. Lena's heart pounded against her ribs. There were 4 of them, lean but strong, their breath steaming in the cold air. They weren't just watching her. They were hunting her. She took a step back, her boots crunching against the snow. The largest wolf, with a thick scar across its snout, let out a low, menacing snarl. The others fanned out, circling her. Her fingers tightened around the axe at her belt. She knew she couldn't outrun them, and she definitely couldn't fight them all off alone. "Think, Lena, think." She slowly raised her axe, her body tensed, ready to strike if necessary. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be enough. The leader of the pack took a step closer, baring its sharp teeth. Lena's breath hitched. She had seconds left before they attacked. And then, a thunderous roar shook the forest. The wolves whipped around, their ears flattening against their skulls. The trees shuddered, and from the darkness of the woods, a massive shape emerged. Lena's eyes widened. It was him, the tiger she had saved. But he was different now. No longer weak, no longer wounded. His golden fur shone like fire against the snow, his muscles rippling with power as he stalked forward, his gaze locked onto the wolves. His low growl rumbled through the trees, a warning that made even the predators hesitate. Lena could only stare in disbelief. "You," she whispered. But there was no time for words. The lead wolf lunged, its teeth flashing in the air. The tiger moved faster than lightning, his massive paw colliding with the wolf's side, sending it skidding across the snow. The second wolf snapped at his flank, but the tiger twisted with deadly grace, sinking his razor-sharp teeth into the attacker's neck. A pained yelp filled the clearing. The other wolves, sensing that they had no chance against the beast, turned tail and fled into the woods. The battle was over in seconds. Lena stood frozen, her chest rising and falling rapidly, the axe still clutched in her trembling hands. The tiger turned toward her now, his golden eyes meeting hers. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then slowly, the tiger lowered his massive head as if in acknowledgement. Lena understood. This was his way of thanking her. "You remembered," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The tiger huffed softly, his tail flicking once before he turned, prowling back toward the trees. He stopped just before disappearing into the shadows. For a moment, he glanced back at her, his eyes filled with something almost human. Then with a final flick of his tail, he vanished into the forest. Lena let out a shaky breath, her heart still racing. She had saved him once, and today he had saved her. The forest was silent once more, save for the soft rustling of the wind through the snow-covered branches. Lena stood motionless, her breath still uneven, her fingers trembling around the handle of her axe. The tiger was gone, disappearing into the depths of the woods, yet she could still feel its presence lingering in the cold air. Her heartbeat began to slow, but the memory of what had just happened was still imprinted in her mind. She had once saved the tiger from a painful death, and today it had saved her life in return. A sense of wonder and disbelief filled her chest. She had heard stories from the elders in the village about how nature repaid kindness, but never had she imagined that such a bond could exist between a human and a beast. She had not just helped an animal, she had gained its trust. From that day forward, Lena's life changed. Every time she entered the forest, she no longer felt alone. Though she never saw the tiger directly, she often felt its watchful gaze from the shadows. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but then there were signs. When she left offerings of food near the clearing where she had freed him, the food would always be gone the next morning, though there were no wolf tracks nearby. Once, when she was walking home late in the evening, she caught a glimpse of golden fur in the distance, moving between the trees. She knew then he was watching over her, and deep inside, she was grateful. Word of the tiger's return began to spread through the village. Hunters reported seeing its tracks, and some even claimed to have heard its roars echoing through the mountains. "It's unnatural," some villagers whispered. "Tigers don't usually stay near human settlements." "It's watching something," the elders murmured. Or someone. Lena remained silent whenever the rumors arose. She knew the truth, but she kept it to herself. She feared that if the wrong person discovered the bond she had with the beast, they would see it as a threat instead of a guardian. And she would never forgive herself if harm came to the creature she had once saved. The winter passed and spring arrived. The ice melted, the trees bloomed, and life returned to the forest. Lena continued her routine, venturing into the woods for firewood, herbs, and fresh water. One day, as she filled a small woven basket with wild berries near a riverbank, she felt it again. A presence. She slowly straightened, her heart beating faster. Turning her head, she saw him, the tiger, standing atop a rocky ledge, bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun. His magnificent form was even more powerful than she remembered. His wound had healed, leaving behind a faint scar, a reminder of their first meeting. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Then in a slow, deliberate movement, the tiger lowered his head. Not in submission, but in a gesture of respect. Lena felt tears well up in her eyes. She took a step forward, raising a hand. The tiger watched her, his golden eyes filled with something almost human. Then with a final flick of his tail, he turned and disappeared into the trees once more. This time, Lena didn't feel sadness. She knew now he wasn't leaving. He was simply returning to his world as she would return to hers. But no matter how much time passed, she would never forget him, because some bonds could never be broken. Years later, when Lena was older, the story of the tiger was still told in the village. Some called it a myth, others a fairy tale, but she knew the truth. When she had been at her weakest, the tiger had saved her. When he had been at his weakest, she had saved him. And though the world saw them as different, they had been two souls bound by fate, forever tied to the forest. And so, whenever the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the echoes of a distant tiger's roar, Lena would smile, because she knew he was still watching over her. Even after all these years, he had never truly left. The bond remained forever. This story reminds us that kindness is never forgotten. In a world where people often act out of fear or selfishness, one act of compassion can change everything. Lena saved the tiger without expecting anything in return, yet fate brought them back together in the most unexpected way. Their bond was more than just between human and beast. It was a testament to the power of kindness, loyalty, and fate. This is a very beautiful and touching story. Listen to it, because it will bring value to our lives. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness came back to you in a way you never expected? Share your thoughts with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story. Stay kind, stay inspired,